Hello, welcome to the Media Podcast. Think of us as your very own media club. I'm Matt Deegan. On the show today, Hat-Trick Productions closes its comedy entertainment division. What does it mean for the future of TV comedy when one of Britain's biggest successes has to shutter its operations? Plus, do broadcasters need to diversify to survive? We look at the investments being made away from the media. Also on the programme, the Washington Post nab another Brit. All that, plus we look at ITN's plans to combat AI deepfakery, whilst Andrew Neil gets stuck in at Times Radio. And in the media quiz, we reheat old formats. That's all to come on this edition of the Media Podcast. In the news this week, the BBC's Director General Tim Davie has sounded a red alert for public service broadcasters around the world as political leaders begin to question funding models. Speaking at an event run by Deloitte and Enders Analysis on Wednesday, Davie stressed the uneconomic decisions the BBC makes in pursuit of UK audiences. Meanwhile, at the same conference, we learned that Disney has spent £3.5 billion in the UK since 2019, according to its EMEA boss Jan Kopen, which tallies with the BFI report this week that said high-end TV spending was strong. However, the same report found that a number of film productions started in this country has dropped from 41 last year to 22 this year. And finally, Warner Brothers Discovery's UK boss, Andrew Georgiou, has declared the era of subscribers at almost any cost is over. With more churn in subscribers between rivals like Netflix, the focus is now on engagement and retention. While our stats and show engagement is holding up strong in every episode, right up until we reveal the rules of the media quiz for some reason. But before we get to that, joining me here at the London... While our stats show engagement is holding strong in every episode, right up until the rules of the media quiz for some reason. But before we get to that, joining me here in the London podcast studios to discuss this week's top media stories, we welcome back Charlotte Tobitt from Press Gazette.
Hello, Matt.
And also head of podcast at Carver PR, Becca Newson.
Hello, lovely to be here.
It's your first time.
It is.
Don't be worried, it's all going to be okay.
I've heard you're quite nice. I know you're very nice, actually. Sometimes.
Some interesting news about people who are not so nice, with a load of celebrities getting their TikTok accounts hacked.
Yes.
Becca, have you ever had any of your clients' TikToks hacked or anything hacked?
Look, we're an entertainment PR agency. We have had some dealings with people being hacked before. Do you know what? Not TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, who have on the whole been very good and very responsive.
Oh, to get them back.
On getting access back. Yes. And actually a lot of the time of when we're dealing with it, it's when there are fake profiles of people. And they are very good at doing that. Of course, when you're a high profile person, maybe not so much when you're just an average person with an Instagram account. Different situation for you. I mean, Charlotte, it's going to be a lot of trouble for anybody if someone gets access to their account and starts tweeting on their behalf.
Yes, and especially, CNN was one of those affected. So for news organisations, kind of the implications of that are potentially massive. And obviously, usually, eventually, people figure out that it was a hack. But you could have hours where stuff's going out and it's kind of completely taints your brand for a bit, and for some people it might not completely recover. And also it could be quite market moving if you wanted to make some money on the side. Not a bad way to do it either. Other thing that happened this week was the leaders debate on ITV. Did you both see the leaders debate?
I did, yes.
The whole thing, all the way through?
Thing. I was saying I watched it on YouTube, which is afterwards, which means you can avoid all the ads, which was great. So I did watch the whole thing. Really interesting to see the reaction after it. Lots has been said. Charlotte, did you manage to get all the way through?
No, I watched some, not all. I was in a household where with someone he definitely couldn't bear to watch it, so we caught up on the Taskmaster final. But I did see some of it, and I've seen a lot of the reaction, and what's interesting is seeing a lot of the clips on social media, and actually, because I caught the beginning and the end, and it seems like they were kind of quite key bits. Like the start obviously was immediately Rishi started bringing in this £2,000 tax claim, which we've all heard a lot about since, and then kind of you instantly see Julie has since said, we did have a whole tax bit planned, but he instantly brought this up, and you do have to decide how to deal with that in real time. And
I'm afraid you're speaking for longer than 45 seconds now, so I have to stop you.
And that is the problem with that format.
Yeah, I think that, the amount of topics they tried to squeeze in to such a short amount of time, really. And also then they were doing these quick fire rounds as well. One word answer, please. In what instance do you go around in a meeting to decide what's going to happen to the country and go, one word, please?
I mean, it's hard, isn't it? Probably you got a few million viewers. Obviously, it's down on previous years, but as is all TV.
Yeah.
It's sort of built for short form in some ways. Yeah. Should the TV companies, should they just run it for 2 hours? Just make it a long form, whole night affair?
Well, they they had like an interview programme directly afterwards with Anushka Asana, the deputy political editor, and I've heard people say, that actually worked really well and kind of better than the actual debate. So, I mean, they obviously thought about the whole package. So, if you can only get Rishi and Keir for an hour, how do you make it kind of a night's event still? And I think they did do that. And I mean, 5.5 million peak, about 5 million average, which is like the highest current affairs on all TV since the coronation last year, and on ITV since the Meghan Harry interview with Oprah, I think, which is, that is impressive numbers nowadays for because that's only the overnight. That's not including like later streaming, people hearing about it and thinking I should catch up. So for 5 million people to sit down that evening and watch the debate, I do think is impressive.
Becca, Rishi wants to do one every week. Do you think they both should, or does it do them more harm than good?
I think ultimately it probably does them more harm than good. However, I do think that something that I find really frustrating is that we're not going to have the manifesto until so much later on in this debate process. It doesn't make sense to me why we do it this way around. And I think that it would be so much more just for people to be able to digest the information, whereas we're only really going to have about 2 weeks until we have to look at that manifesto and then decide what we're going to do. It's such a short period of time. So I think that the headlines, everything that's come out of it, they'll be I don't think they'll be keen to do that many more. I wonder what he'll be thinking now, really, because I think ITV will be struggling a lot with the feedback that they've got from that. And then the £2,000, I mean, it was just repeated about 8 times through the entire hour. I mean,
we've got Sky News one next week.
Which they've only confirmed, like Rishi wasn't definitely doing. And he has confirmed that since the ITV debate. So he obviously didn't think it was that disastrous.
And I guess the BBC have announced there'll be some things done in a slightly different format. I'm kind of interested if that then ends or they continue to push on with more telly.
It's true that, I mean, stuff during election campaigns, I remember, I can't remember if it was the last one or the one before, but like Boris Johnson, I think, cancelled something, like partway through, and you're like, so just because it's in the diary doesn't mean it's definitely happening. If something that makes them look bad happens, then they'll be like, actually, that is just not worth it for us. But like what you're saying about the manifestos, I agree, but it's not the media's fault that the manifestos are out so late, so they're really doing the best to still hold everyone to account and get them to maybe give us as much as they can before the official manifesto.
Well, so more on that a little bit later on when we're going to talk about Andrew Neil. Some news as we were just starting to record. Hat-Trick have shuttered their comedy entertainment division. These are the people that behind Have I Got News For You, and Mastermind, which will kind of still remain on the air. But they've lost a few other shows, haven't they, over the past sort of couple of years, Hat-Trick, Becca?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, they've had some big hitters, Prince Andrew the musical, Channel 4, but I think it's very much a sign of the times of, Channel 4 have obviously not been commissioning, and I think it's just had a real knock-on effect, which is such a shame, because it is, they've come out with some of the most iconic comedy-focused shows in the UK, and obviously they've got Have I Got News For You coming out in the US. I think we said it was CNN who are picking that up in the run-up to the election, but obviously none of this has been enough to be able to counter the loss that they've seen.
Yeah, Jimmy Mulville has slammed the BBC's decision to basically cancel the genre of studio comedy entertainment. So they lost things like Mock the Week and Frankie Boyle's New World Order. There was also the Josh Widdicombe show that was cancelled last year after Force Series 2. Charlotte, I mean, we keep coming back to stories about TV cutting back. This is another commissioning-led trouble. Yeah,
and it all still comes down to the advertising market ultimately, because that's what so many of them are relying on to fund the programming. So, advertising downturn, it's the same in the news publisher market as well. So that's something we hear about a lot, and it's just not really picking up, and there's so much caution. So I think it's just yet another result of that, sadly.
Well, something that's trying to balance out that drop in advertising was from a story we saw in The Guardian on Monday, where there's a growing trend of broadcasters investing in startups, but they're not doing it with cash. They're often doing it with advertising inventory. So they give you some free ads on Channel 4 or ITV in exchange for share your business. ITV have struck a deal with estate agent Purple Bricks last week in one of these deals. Charlotte, it makes sense, doesn't it, when you've got this unspent ad inventory?
Yeah, I think it makes perfect sense. It's similar to the revenue diversification we're seeing from all sorts of other media businesses, and like FT Ventures, that's relatively recent, and similarly doing investment. They just announced one this week with a news organisation in Canada, and so it's a very similar thing where, advertising isn't cutting it. What else can we tie in? And I think it's very clever, and I hope that it works.
Matt, you own a radio station. Thoughts? Would you ever sell off?
Would I give up a percentage? I had a look at the offer that ITV make to businesses. There's sort of two offers, really. There's a sort of small version where they kind of give you half price advertising, and then a sort of bigger full fat version where they give you quite a lot of advertising for a share of your business. And it's quite interesting. I think there are certain businesses which do really well for TV advertising. So they point to a lot of direct response advertising, things like meal boxes and that kind of stuff, where you just need people to know about your products and to really kind of hammer the offers and see put discounts on screen and see people kind of sign up. So I think for certain things it probably does work really well. It does remind me though, when I used to work at a GWR back in the early noughties, very early noughties, they used to do this. They invested in a load of .coms in the first .com boom. I think they invested in 20 companies, and they all went bust. They were all the most unsuccessful bit of investment. So hopefully ITV will be slightly better at doing this. I mean, I suppose no investment is risk-free for a broadcaster, but haven't really got much to lose, have they?
I mean, all the stories that you've been covering recently would suggest so, yeah.
OK, now the Washington Post has bagged the Telegraph's deputy editor Robert Winnett to run the paper. There's been a lot of turmoil in US media organisations, a lot of Brits going over. Mark Thompson's gone to CNN. There's been quite a bit of pushback locally at the Washington Post about this. Charlotte, is this going to be good news for the Washington Post? Is it good news for Robert Winnett, or is he walking into a bit of a storm?
He's definitely walking into a storm, because it sounds like staff are not happy with the way all this has been handled. The editor who's just left, Sally Busby, they really didn't see it coming, and I think she'd had a bit of clash with Will Lewis, the CEO, and then on Monday Will had a staff meeting where apparently he essentially said to the newsroom, you're losing audience, using that pronoun, and we lost $77 million last year. I can't sugarcoat it anymore. Something drastic needs to be done. Which
went down like a bucket of sick in the newsroom, I imagine.
Basically. And
but is he right?
Well, so that's why I think that maybe this is not the worst thing, because clearly something needs to shake up, and he does have quite a drastic plan. Robert Winnett is going to come but after the election, and lead the main newsroom. Then they've got what they think of as like a second operation, The Opinion, because that's separate in America. But then Will Lewis is creating what he called a third newsroom, which is like service and social media stuff for audiences that they're just not reaching and haven't been able to reach. And then so the Wall Street Journal editor, Matt Murray, who's coming in to lead on an interim basis, he will then be the leader of this third newsroom. And so I mean, I don't know if it will work. I was just on my way here listening, sorry to mention a rival podcast, but Media Confidential.
Yes.
And Alan Rusbridger and Lionel Barber seemed to scoff quite a lot at that idea,
That's
which was
surprising
quite funny.
because they love a white man on that show. Sorry. Oh.
Yeah, and it's also interesting at a time. So, you know, they had this very uncomfortable town hall meeting with staff, and that comes hot on the heels of a kind of similar unhappiness at the Wall Street Journal, led by another Brit, Emma Tucker, formerly of the Sunday Times. And like last week, they had a big post-it note protest where they're all putting post-it notes on her glass-walled office because they're unhappy with a lot of the restructuring and cuts she's been doing.
Ironically, I think that feels very British. Yeah, just sort of passively aggressive, put a post-it note on there.
There was a quote from like her assistant, I think, and apparently was just standing there like, do you think this is helping? Which I very much enjoyed. So, I mean, I could talk about this all day, but yeah, I think it is quite fascinating what's going on.
There is an interesting thing. I was looking at some Emily Bell tweets as she sort of splits the time between the UK and the US. Obviously, does a lot in journalism. And a lot of America is sort of a little bit unhappy about the British invasion. She was saying the reason why Brits are employed is they're used to being in a very competitive news environment here, particularly the newspapers. They're used to working for strange people, crazy billionaires, and for kind of being a bit more kind of scoop driven and a bit more marketing driven, which the US papers haven't particularly had to worry about in the past. And there isn't the New York Times, Washington Post being the sort of two left. So it's sort of here to inject some enthusiasm and some activity. Do you think that's a good thing that they're bringing to America?
The way that things are going here in the UK, my experience as a PR is, you know, and I think a lot of people as consumers as well have just felt that everything is so clickbait driven now. Increasingly news is going that way as well. You know, we report on what people are saying on social media as opposed to the story at the heart of it. And I think that, I mean, I'm sure that's already happening in the US, but you know, I wonder if it's going to go even more so that way. I don't blame those people for going over there and taking that opportunity. I mean, It's a huge opportunity.
Just on the clickbait point, I think it's interesting that the two that we've mentioned already, Robert Winnett and Emma Tucker, they have come from two of the businesses in the UK that have done really well with subscriptions. So, you know, Robert's been deputy at the Telegraph, where over the past few years it's really pivoted to subscription first. And, you know, they have some very clever data about subscriber engagement. They don't care so much nowadays about overall reach. Similar at the Times and Sunday Times. And they're both profitable businesses. So of anyone to go to those businesses and do that and try and boost their own subscription businesses, especially in this digital world, I think is they're probably the right people. You know, it's not like they're just from a completely different business model.
I do think it's really interesting because Telegraph in particular, I think they, you know, when we speak to them, their demographic is really, you know, generally speaking, older men 60 plus is actually what they say, which is, you know, in the grand scheme of things, quite a bit older. And the fact that their digital arm has, you know, is thriving is really, really interesting that those people are picking it up digitally and, you know, they're just subscribing. And what you were saying about the newsroom, the third newsroom that they want to, you know, introduce there, actually that sounds like something that is, I would have assumed, is skewed towards a younger audience much more for socials, etc. So I'd just be intrigued to see which avenue they're going to go down. You know, the older audience who they want to turn into subscribers, or the social younger Gen Z audience, led by
bringing new people into the fold. There was some pushback, wasn't there, from the staff about why you setting up a third newsroom? Shouldn't this be in the you know, at the centre of what we do anyway? And then his response was, well, it hasn't worked so far.
Which I guess is a fair point. I mean, you know, Washington Post were like one of the first big news publishers doing TikTok well and regularly. So surprises me in that sense, in that they were so ahead of the game on TikTok, and yet clearly he's saying, well, what's it done for us, I guess.
Well,
shame.
we will see, and whether he can keep the faith, or the journalists can keep the faith in him. A couple of radio talent updates for you. Ronan Keating is leaving Magic Breakfast after 7 years on that show. Becca, 7 years, pretty good innings for a breakfast show. Yeah. Getting up early that day is not fun, especially when you do other things.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think him and Harriet were a great matching there. It is quite a long innings for a breakfast show, and it was something that was quite different from him at the time. I think they did a really great job in, building that community. I know a lot of people who love their breakfast show, so it's sad to see him go. I actually don't think he's announced what he's doing next yet.
No, I think he said he's going to kind of go back to music and do other things. Obviously, he pops up on the One Show quite a bit. I mean, I'm sure he doesn't. I'm sure the money is lovely. I'm sure he doesn't need the money, but it does take a big part of his time. I think also he's had some family kind of news, sad news over the past few months. I think that's probably affected it too. The other thing, I was talking to someone quite a long time ago about this show, and they were saying, even if the figures weren't maybe as high as they used to be, the excitement from agencies about Ronan presenting made it a very profitable programme. Yeah. And you don't often sort of think about that.
Yeah, I think it's like the Amanda Holden effect, isn't it, as well, at heart, and bringing that glitzy showbiz element to something. And I very much think that, he did that for Magic as well, so it's definitely bringing that sparkle.
Anybody you think might take on the role?
Oh, it's
hard.
I mean, there's really a lot of moving about at the moment, isn't there? There's a lot of moving about, so it's tough to say. I'd like to think that they continue with that same dynamic that him and Harriet Scott
They've said that Harriet's going to stick around.
Yeah, absolutely.
And get a new co-host.
Yeah, and I think she's excellent. I'm really pleased about that. So hopefully I think they keep that dynamic that they have. I think that audiences have enjoyed having that. It's the right demographic. It's a slight 40 plus audience. The music suits it. So hopefully they stick with that range. Don't shake things up too much.
Charlotte, Magic Breakfast listener?
Sometimes I do like Ronan, I must say.
Oh, okay.
I was lucky enough to go to a Christmas event that they did, and they have Ronan and Harriet hosting, but then Ronan can just do a song as well. It was great.
It's very efficient, very commercial radio, very efficient. Meanwhile, Andrew Neil has started his new show on Times Radio this week, ahead of schedule. Had a bit of trouble at Times Radio, so Matt Chorley announced he was off, or is off, to cover the election on 5 Live. Election happens early. Andrew Neil was supposed to come in September. They've dragged him forward, so I think they've kept Matt Chorley and they've got Andrew Neil. It's not great being a programme controller when the news hits.
No, but I guess they've kind of ended up with best of both. I guess maybe it's not ideal when listeners know that someone like Matt Chorley is planning to leave, but at the same time he'll do his best for the election, because broadcasters like that just love covering elections, so he'll have fun wherever he is. And then you've got a heavyweight like Andrew Neil kind of next to him in the schedule. It's kind of a powerhouse combo. And then I think Andrew Neil's going to have a break over the summer, and then he's going to come back but more focused on the US election.
Yes.
And he did say, actually, for me, this has worked out better, because otherwise in the autumn I would have been trying to do the UK and US elections kind of at the same time, and it would have all been a bit rushed. But I think now he'll be able to really focus and use his skills that he's known for to do a really good job for the next month.
There was a story on Popbitch. Did you see this about Times Radio?
The bus.
The bus.
The bus.
So they'd got a bus all branded up. Then Matt left. They had to send the bus back to be debranded, and then he stayed, and then the dates changed. I think that bus has been rebranded many times.
But I don't think his face has made it onto the bus, has it? Unfortunately, he won't be driving around London.
Yeah, the bus was not out in week 1 of the general election. It was probably in somewhere else.
Incredibly bad timing. I think it is interesting to see Andrew Neil go back to the Times. I mean, they've really put their flag in the ground as they want to be, the election channel. I mean, they have so many podcasts now about the election as well, and in general. But yeah, so he obviously a Sunday Times editor, and he's kind of gone back to that a little bit. I don't know if he's trying to, after GB News, is he going back to the roots a little bit?
Yeah.
Is he trying to make a link there?
I mean, 75 years old, doesn't need to do this. Obviously enjoys doing this. on air there's been quite a bit of sort of encouragement for politicians and the leaders to come on and be interviewed by him. If any of the politicians were your clients, would you advise they went on and spoke to Andrew Neil on his Times radio show?
I'd be hesitant. But I think I will be really intrigued to see actually throughout the course of towards the election where people are going to be guesting. I mean, I head up podcast team at Carver, so I've got my eyes on where are they going to be choosing to speak on podcasts.
I mean, they should do.
They should do. What's incredible is in the top, I think it's in the top 100, top 200, there are 33, 35 podcasts which are purely focusing on the election right now. It's a staggering amount. We've got the ones who have been around for a long time, last couple of years, like the news agents, electoral dysfunction, and then we've got new ones like Political Currency, Pod Save the UK, and they are now reacting so quickly to things compared to picking up a paper the next day and seeing the headlines. It's really fascinating, the emergency nature of what they're doing.
Also, a lot more episodes coming from all of those shows. Some have gone daily, others are doing extra episodes a week.
Yeah. Do
you think it's a challenge for existing politics press seeing all these podcasts pop up, or is it mainly them people doing those shows?
Well, it's a lot of them, yeah. I did start writing a list, but
there's Sky News, Times have got two, Telegraph have got a new one.
I'm interested that you described electoral dysfunctions having been around a long time or a couple of years, considering it only started a couple of months ago. So I feel like they've already got in our...
because they reuse the feed from what they already had. So technically, when you go onto it, there's like 70 episodes.
But it's a very different format. But and they've obviously... Jess Phillips is a host and they'd barely got going, and now she can't be a host because she's a candidate. But anyway, as you say, a lot of it is the news publishers themselves. I think it helps them do a better, like more innovative job to have non-traditional news publishers as well. I think it would be interesting to kind of assess after the election kind of who won, who did break through, whether it is just like the news agents and the rest is politics, or like how many of these, because obviously people who are you'll probably during the election get more people who are interested in politics than normally, but that's still not going to be loads and loads of people who are bothered to listen to a political podcast. And then those people, to have daily, most people can only listen to like a couple a day, maybe.
I think there's a real danger sometimes with having too much content. And if you are knocking out a load of episodes, which one do people choose if they've only got a certain amount of time? Do you become less special and actually the consumption drops? I think there's also a great opportunity to demonstrate what you do to other people outside of an election period. So do people kind of come for your guests or come for the analysis or come for the election? And it's like, actually, you're quite good people. I'd quite like to listen to you later on. So there's a big opportunity with that.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see if the celebrity podcasts jump into the politics space too.
I mean, they have here and there. Miss Me with Liliana and Makita Oliver. I think that they've mentioned it here and there. The Rest is Entertainment, I think, have said we're not touching that, and then they talked about it a little bit. So I think that it is just such a huge thing which is going to be happening for the next couple of weeks. It's impossible to move without seeing it. And it's something that politics is everything. I think to a certain degree, if you're just talking about life, you almost have to talk about what's going on. So it's really intriguing. I'll be also really interested to see what happens to these podcasts after the election, and a lot of rebranded, so you've got Newscast, which have put an election stamp on it, and will that bump them up the charts significantly for a long time? I'm not sure. And what will they do with the feeds afterwards? That's always nerdy and want to know what's going to happen to those the audiences that you have built up. What's next for them?
And I mentioned it last week, but if you want a daily email newsletter of what all the politics shows are covering on their podcasts, you can subscribe to Election Daily at podcastrex.com, podcastrex.com. Right, so we're back with more media news after this. Welcome back. Becca and Charlotte are here with me for some more news about the industry. UK publishers are taking Google to a competition tribunal in a case that could force the tech giant to pay a hefty bit of compensation. Charlotte, how big are we talking?
Well, the people bringing the claim think it could be worth up to £13.6 billion in, and that's essentially the revenue they say that publishers of websites and apps lost in revenue between 2014 and 2022 because of Google's ad monopoly.
So this is Google being accused of using their own ad server, AdX, more favourably than rivals, which in turn nets publishers less money, hence the compensation.
Yeah, essentially. It is all quite complicated. I kind of got my head around it to write a story, but it's a bit more complicated saying it out loud. But yeah, it's all about it's kind of three elements: publisher ad servers, supply-side platforms, and demand-side platforms. It's all about showing programmatic advertising, essentially.
And they sort of, the view is that they kind of put their thumb a little bit on the scale.
Yeah, which we should say that Google has called it speculative and opportunistic, and will oppose it vigorously. So if it genuinely does go to trial, which it sounds like it will, that'll be fascinating, because there have been a lot of crackdowns over Google's alleged monopoly kind of ongoing in the EU and the US as well. So that's kind of a lot of battlefronts at the same time.
Yes, if someone wins somewhere, the floodgates will open a lot.
From what I understand, it's an opt-out.
Yes, yeah, good point.
Lawsuit, isn't it? Or class action. Do you know if anyone has opted out of it?
Not that I know of. I don't think there's any. I guess maybe the only reason to opt out would be if they have a really strong relationship with Google that they don't want to jeopardize. But the people running it have said, they have like third-party litigation funding, and they also have insurance. So if they lose, Google's costs will be covered. So they're basically saying, publishers, you don't have to pay any costs.
Nothing
so
to lose.
It doesn't. Yeah, exactly.
13 billion to win.
Yeah.
It's like a Euro Millions rollover all over again. Running a paper off ad revenue alone is sort of becoming less and less tenable. We've talked a bit about subscription. Becca, when you're working with publications, or so you're kind of pitching them things, and you would just like them to copy and paste them onto their websites, wouldn't you? Ideally. But are they changing how they work? Do you see there's less people there? Does it change what you have to do?
I mean, Evening Standard going to weekly is just another domino effect, really, of what's happening in the print industry. I think a lot has changed over the last 5 years. Teams are getting smaller. They're busy, which means that actually sometimes they do copy and paste stuff because they've not got the time. I find it really sad, and I think that, there's a lot said around, it's just clickbaity, it's just etc. But they're not, they're trying to make profit, and I really understand that. A lot of the celebrity clients that we work with, it can be hard to kind of put across how pressured some of these people are, and have a bit of empathy for them, which I really do. I think that in terms of interview slots across the board, it's getting tighter and tighter and tighter. There's even things on Radio 2, a lot of the replacement presenters that we're seeing, they don't have interview slots. Vernon Kay, for example, he has his slots where it's, very formulaic, but there's not very much time for, somebody to talk about their new TV show, about their new podcast, about their new book. So, there's that. And then also what we're seeing now is the lead times for everything is getting longer and longer and longer.
Is that interesting?
It is really interesting.
Yeah.
For print,
and it's actually there's less people trying to knock out a magazine, so it's going to take them a longer amount of time to do that.
Interestingly, we see it more in radio and TV, interestingly. But I also think, in print, potentially there's been some knock-on effect as well. But, we're looking at kind of, we used to say, you pitch for broadcasts like 2 weeks before or something like that. It's much, much longer now, much longer. We've got radio shows that are weekend facing, only, but they're booking up until September now already. So it's really interesting to see how much it's changed in the last 5 years. But yeah, it's really sad to see. And, I'm not sure what the solution is, because a lot of comments that you see on Facebook posts, Twitter, etc., are about how the media's, just money hungry and they just need to make profits. It's a business. Of course it has to make profit. So I'm not really sure what the answer is there.
I mean, Charlotte, there's definitely sort of a change in focus on business model. And we see it definitely with subscription. The Google money, whether there should have been more or not, has disappeared. Same with a lot of the cash going to Facebook, a lot of the cash is going to Google, less is going to publishers. They've got to reinvent their model or else they're done.
Yeah, basically, which comes back to earlier I touched on revenue diversification. So whether it's for a lot of people now, it's a mixture of advertising, subscriptions, whether that's full paywall or a slight paywall like Mail Online. Events are growing for a lot, maybe a mixture of consumer and B2B even like the FT going harder on like the professional or specifically professional audience and other people doing similar. So it's really about having a combination, because even we talk about subscriptions are doing better, but probably it's a combination you need, and it's just about finding the balance that's right for each publisher, because one of the kind of exceptions to that is Reach, Mirror, Express, Manchester News, etc. They really are still focused on advertising mainly. They think that that paywalls won't work for them, but also B, that content should be available freely, and not all proper written by journalists news content should be paid for, because that's bad for democracy, etc.
Yes. I mean, they'll have an ad unit on a Reach publication.
Yeah, but I mean, as their CEO has said, that's how we make money. So a lot of their journalists admit it's not always the best user experience, but we're really trying to find the best balance, and they are experimenting with some small paid for things like anyone else. So as I say, it's about finding the balance that's right for your brand.
Well, finally, just before the quiz, ITN have signed a deal that they hope will protect their extensive archive from AI trawling, copyright infringement, and general deep fakery. Charlotte, this is an interesting way to watermark imagery and sound using the blockchain. I won't ask you to explain how it works.
No, please don't.
But does it give you hope? Because, I mean, we've talked about AI and some people are licensing their content. Others, they were worried that someone's going to nick it anyway.
Yes, so I think it's very clever. It's kind of, as you say, we've done plenty of stories now about people like Financial Times and News Corp doing deals with the likes of OpenAI. This is kind of the first deal we've written about that's specifically about protecting the archive. And it's kind of all the things you said, but also about like just proving when content is out in the world that it is real, and kind of always being able to say, well, this is original content from that event. And I think it's really really good to see that happening. It would be interesting to see if other, like even like the BBC, for example, maybe that would be good for that. They'll have even bigger archives.
Yeah, I think there is definitely something in knowing the provenance of things. There's been a huge amount of AI material that appears on Facebook now that is clearly odd and strange. I mean, Becca, going full circle with our TikTok chat earlier, have you had to counter or prepare any celebrities for deep fakes, or are people using their faces or voices to do anything?
I don't know if you've heard about this, but there was an instance, I think a couple of months ago now, with Liz Bonin.
Right.
Do you know this?
No.
So Liz Bonin is a BBC wildlife presenter, and so she saw adverts of herself on social channels, and actually they weren't something that A, she'd signed off, B, she'd been paid for, or C, that she recognised at all. And what had actually happened is the CEO of this company, which I think was a mosquito bite repellent or something like that, they had actually been receiving voice notes that were AI generated from Liz Bonin saying, yes, I'd love to work on this campaign.
Oh, okay.
Here's imagery. Here's what you need.
So did they pay the faker? They paid
the faker.
They thought they were getting the real Liz.
Who I believe had approached on a fake Facebook account. So, it just goes to show you don't even need to be hacked. It's just that someone posing as you. And obviously verification has kind of gone out the window. No one knows what that means anymore to have a tick. So, her spokespeople said, that is essentially theft. And, the company had to come out and go, look, this is what's happened. It's a complete misunderstanding. But it is scary that they were using AI to create those voice notes, which is another thing, which is, a lot of people are talking about their own voices being recreated for advertising. So you can be sold across XYZ space without any of your time, which is terrifying. There are some very real examples. There's a great Deadline article on it, I believe, and Guardian covered it as well. And that was a really real-time thing that was happening. She was tweeting about it going, what's happening? It is starting to happen.
I mean, especially now there's so much output out there that you can use to train these models. You don't actually need that much time to do it. I was kind of talking to my wife and saying, there's quite a lot of me out there on the internet because of things like this. If you want to synthesize my voice, it's incredibly simple to do that.
Meta have said about Facebook and Instagram being used, the posts that we all put on there, being used to essentially train AI. And so, Matt, whatever you've got, you and a lovely holiday in your trunks, they'll take that and they'll go, right, that is man, blonde, on holiday in XYZ, and use it to try and understand how they can be smarter and be better. I
mean, if people want to use my voice for anti-mosquito commercials, I mean, just cut me in. I'm sure it'll be fine.
It's very willing.
Get in touch. Just enough time for the media quiz. This week we're playing Old or New. As we know, it's far easier to create new stories with established characters or formats. So in this game, I'll describe a new commission for a network. You tell me if it's an original idea or one based on established IP.
Ooh, everything's an old idea.
Well, we'll see. Buzz in with your names if you know the answer. So Charlotte, you will say...
Charlotte.
And Becca, you will say...
Becca.
Let's play Old or New. In each episode, the show reveals the dramatic story of an individual dinosaur whose remains are currently being unearthed by the world's leading dinosaur hunters.
Charlotte. Walking with Dinosaurs.
Is it old or is it new?
It's old.
It is old.
Because Walking with Dinosaurs is coming
old.
back. Yeah, those dinosaurs are not new.
Yes, Walking with Dinosaurs, recommissioned after 25 years by the BBC and PBS. Do you think, Becca, that the brand has a strong enough recognition with people? It's been away for a long time.
Not me, but I feel I'm not the target audience. Look, I think there will be audiences who are discovering it for the first time, and for want of a better, I just don't think dinosaurs go out of trend.
Always in fashion.
Yeah, weirdly, I think it's this kind of, you just have to look at the popularity of the Natural History Museum and all, all of that. I think there is this forever fascination around it. I think that, as I said, I don't think I'm the target audience for it, but I think there will be a lot of people who are excited it's coming back. Yeah.
In a weird way, I think it's similar to Gladiators. Like, if you remember it at the time, you'll love it, but also if you're a kid now, you'll also love it.
Yes.
Exactly, yeah.
Right, question number 2. Netflix have commissioned a Stephen Knight pen feature film starring this year's Oscar award-winning actor set in Edwardian Birmingham.
Charlotte.
Oh, in straight away. Old or new?
Old.
It is old. What's it old about?
Peaky Blinders.
Yes. This is the Peaky Blinders feature film beginning shooting this summer. Fan of the original show?
Yes, looking forward to it.
I went and saw the kind of experiential version that was in Camden Town.
Oh, how was it?
It was really good. It was really good.
I just saw the dance that was on the BAFTAs.
Oh, yeah.
The sort of slow motion. Yeah, it was interesting.
Well, I'm sure it will do well, and I think it's also being filmed in Birmingham studios that he's built, which is impressive too. Okay, question number 3. Buzz in, old or new? A new podcast from Wondery aims to take listeners into the stories behind the most iconic sporting moments.
Becca, yes, new.
It is new. What is it?
It is Colin Murray and Ellis James.
That's correct.
Wondery, everything to play for. There's been a lot of buzz about it. I think it's a great pairing. Colin Murray, underrated.
You think so?
Yeah, I love Colin Murray. I think he's excellent on Countdown as well. Again, not really meant to be the target audience, I don't think, but love a bit of Countdown. And yes, it's just been announced. It's doing well in the charts so far.
Yeah, it's great. Wondery investing more in the UK. Yeah. They've launched their Wondery Plus in the UK as well.
First sports title for them here in the UK. It'll be really interesting to see how it does, but I think the pairing is really strong.
Well, we'll see how it will do. So that makes Charlotte our winner. Congratulations.
Woohoo!
You need to go back through our old episodes and using the blockchain mark out elements so it doesn't get duplicated by AI. If you did by next week, that'd be great. Thank you both for joining us on the show. How can people keep up with your work, Charlotte?
Pressgazette.co.uk or Charlotte Tobitt LinkedIn. I'm probably more active than on Twitter nowadays.
Yes, and Becca, how can people keep up with what you're up to?
Carver PR on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, all of the places, and that's where everything we're doing across lots of different types of entertainment is living.
Lovely, thank you both. And that's it from us today. Remember, there's 25% off your first booking at the London Podcast Studios, where we record our show each week. When you use the code MEDIAPOD, just head to thelondonpodcaststudios.com for 25% off with the code MEDIAPOD. And if you're new to the show, make sure you hit that follow button so you get every episode. And whilst you're on your favourite app of choice, if you're able to, why not give us a review? My name is Matt Deegan. The producer was Matt Hill. It was a Rethink Audio production. I'll see you next week.